Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a scope that, well, it spans 6,000 years.
Yeah, it's a big one.
We have this really powerful stack of sources, articles, historical research, philosophical analyses that connects the ethical foundation of one of the world's oldest civilizations directly to the debates raging right now.
Yeah, exactly. Debates about justice, about historical truth, and the future of education. It's not just a history lesson.
No, not at all.
The sources really challenge us to trace the origins of Africa's ancient moral order, this concept of ma'at, and then apply that framework to, well, to modern movements that are trying to preserve truth.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to connect a 6,000-year-old philosophy of cosmic balance to today's political and educational crises. The goal is for you, the listener, to walk away with a stronger ethical framework.
And to really understand how these ancient principles might inform modern ways of achieving justice.
Okay, let's get into it. We have to start at the absolute beginning of organized moral thought in this tradition. So where is that?
We have to start in the south, long before the pyramids. We start in Tasseti, which translates roughly to the land of the bow.
Tasseti?
Our sources point to this region as the cradle of organized African civilization and, this is the critical part, the start of moral governance nearly 6 millennia ago.
Right. It's one thing to have a civilization, but it's a whole other thing to build an ethical system right from the get-go. How did that even emerge?
It came from observation, deep, profound observation. The early Tassetians, they were just incredibly attuned to the natural world.
What do you mean?
They watched the cosmic cycles, the movements of the sun, the stars, and of course the Nile, the completely reliable, predictable flood and recession of the Nile River. They saw a universe that operated with a fundamental, perfect rhythm.
So they're seeing this order in the heavens and on earth, and they decide human society needs to reflect that same divine order.
That's exactly. Their early rituals, their governance structures, they were all precursors to Ma'at. They were designed to enforce balance and reciprocity among people, mirroring the balance they saw in the cosmos.
So their symbols, like the crown, they weren't just for show.
Not at all. The sources really emphasize this. The crown, the royal standards, they were physical representations of the unity between spiritual law and earthly human governance.
Okay, so that concept then moves north, and it fully anchors Kemet, which most of us know as ancient Egypt. And this is where Ma'at becomes the central idea.
It becomes a central governing force. Ma'at is the word that holds it all together. Truth, justice, righteousness, cosmic harmony. It wasn't just a virtue people aimed for.
It was the mechanism.
It was the mechanism that powered the state. Ma'at governed every single part of Kemetic life law, governance, education, spirituality. It anchored the whole society in moral integrity.
And here's where it gets really fascinating, because Ma'at wasn't some, fuzzy, abstract idea people could just interpret however they wanted. It was actually broken down into principles. What were those pillars?
It was structured around 7 guiding principles. Think of them like these interlocking gears. Truth, justice, balance, harmony, order, reciprocity, and propriety.
7 of them.
Yes. And every law, every social custom, every judgment from a court had to align with those 7 points.
That's incredibly specific for a moral foundation, which means the leader, the pharaoh, had a massive job, right? An almost existential one.
Absolutely. The pharaohs were called the lords of Ma'at. Their #1 job was to maintain this cosmic balance, to ensure justice flowed, and by doing that, they prevented Isfet.
Okay, let's define that. Isfet. If Ma'at is order and harmony, then Isfet is...
It's the opposite. It's chaos, imbalance, injustice, discord. Our sources really stress that for the people of Kemet, breaking Ma'at's order wasn't just, committing a crime.
It was bigger than that.
It was an act that invited societal collapse. It threatened the cosmic flow itself. If the Nile didn't flood one year, or if an enemy attacked, that was often seen as a sign that the pharaoh was failing to uphold Ma'at.
So he was letting Isfet get a foothold. That makes it so much more real. It's not just bad behavior, it's an existential threat. And the real genius of it, as the sources describe, is that this balance wasn't just the king's job. It was everyone's job.
That's the democratic core of the system, you could say. The 42 ideals of Ma'at, those were the personal, daily moral codes for every single person.
And this is where the famous negative confessions come in, right? When you died.
Yes, when individuals died, they were believed to stand before the gods and recite this list, which was essentially a checklist proving you hadn't promoted Isfet during your life.
And they were framed as, I have not done something.
Precisely. The declarations weren't, I gave to the poor, but I have not caused pain. I have not done injustice. I have not made anyone weep. These confessions ensured that individual conduct, the tiny actions of daily life, were directly contributing to cosmic and societal order.
Which brings us perfectly into part two. We're moving from this divine law to practical human ethics, all written down by one of history's first known authors, Dahotep.
Dahotep. He was a vizier during the Old Kingdom, so a very powerful man, basically the prime minister. He took these grand abstract concepts of Ma'at and he distilled them into practical instructions
For how to behave.
for human behavior and for good governance. His book, The Instruction of Dahotep, is the oldest known book of wisdom in the entire world.
So this isn't just philosophy, it's like an executive's guide to ethical leadership. What were some of the key takeaways from it?
His focus was all about social harmony and ethical conduct. He taught humility, especially for people in power, respect for elders, but also for subordinates, fairness in judgment, and, crucially, self-control in speech.
I mean, imagine a politician today being told that true wisdom is in listening more than speaking.
Right. It seems like a lesson that never goes out of style.
Can you give us an example, one of his instructions that really shows that practical focus?
Oh, absolutely. There's a famous passage about anger. Dahotep advises leaders, if you find a disputant while he is hot, be calm toward him. Do not drive him away.
So don't meet fire with fire.
Exactly. He says a wise person stays collected because, and this is the key line, wrongdoing never yet brought its venture to port. He's teaching that if you meet anger with anger, you destroy Ma'at. You have to meet chaos as fet with controlled balance.
And that idea that integrity wins out in the long run over short-term aggression is just so powerful. Dahotep himself said Ma'at was good and lasting.
And he warned that those who deviate from it sow their own destruction. It's all about accountability. He was setting up a system where integrity wasn't just a personal choice. It was like a societal insurance policy.
And this system Ma established and Dahotep applied, it created a society where justice was a lived reality for centuries.
Centuries before, many other global traditions even started to institutionalize similar ideas. And what's really fascinating is the resilience of this philosophy. It didn't just fade away with Kemet.
Right, it endured, it crossed borders.
It was carried forward by the civilizations to the south, especially Nubia and Kush. When Kemet faced instability or invasions, the moral flame of Ma was often preserved, even revived, by Nubian leaders.
How did they do that? How did they actively preserve it?
Through deliberate action, building massive temples to restore the spiritual centers, reforming education to re-emphasize Dahotep's teachings, and significantly, maintaining balance in their own government. The matrilineal system in Kush, for example, with powerful queen mothers, reflected this deep respect for divine balance.
So we have this tradition spanning thousands of years that's just proof that African governance models prioritized justice and harmony as the core function of the state. It's an unbroken chain.
It is an unbroken chain of moral governance until we hit a massive historical rupture, a rupture that our sources identify as the beginning of the modern crisis of truth.
And this is where we have to transition, just as the sources do, to the claim that European colonization began this process of systematically redefining history, trying to strip away these Ma'at-based principles from global education.
The sources frame this as a deliberate shift from our story to his story.
Our story versus his story.
Yeah. And our story learning in this framework is about restoring historical truth, recognizing moral balance, and rebuilding that intergenerational responsibility, the very things Ma'at demanded. The colonial project is seen as enforcing an artificial, selective history that sidelines indigenous contributions.
Which brings us right to the core claim of the sources we looked at. That this struggle for historical accuracy today is not just some academic fight. It's a modern version of the ancient struggle between Ma and Isfet.
And this is where the authors of these materials get very specific about what they see as the most pressing contemporary challenge to truth and balance. They explicitly focus on Project 2025 as representing an ideological assault on truth, balance, and equity.
They call it the antithesis of Ma'at.
Yes.
And we have to be impartial here. We need to report exactly how the sources define this opposition. How do they connect a specific modern policy agenda to a 6,000-year-old concept of chaos?
They use those ancient philosophical terms to analyze the contemporary agenda. They claim that its goal to dismantle federal agencies, strip equity mandates, revise history standards, promotes what they call a false order. That's their definition of modern Isfet.
Chaos disguised as structure.
Precisely. And in education specifically, they argue this false order shows up through the suppression of historical accuracy, limits on cultural diversity programs, and attempts to restrict moral education that emphasizes systemic justice.
And they cite civil rights organizations?
They do. The sources cite organizations that warn that dismantling equity-focused programs, which they see as efforts to restore balance, would directly lead to societal disharmony and injustice. It would echo the very chaos that was designed to oppose.
So for the authors we reviewed, the struggle to preserve historical truth and fight for equity today is, well, it's the modern embodiment of defending Ma.
Exactly. Ma'at is offered here as a philosophical bedrock for social resistance, a resistance rooted not in partisan politics, but in a cosmic framework that demands universal truth and justice.
So if Ma'at is the framework, how do the sources say we can practically apply these principles today, in our lives, in our education system? What's the call to action?
The recommendations are very tangible, and they focus heavily on curriculum reform. The sources urge embedding Mott-centered ethics directly into classroom instruction.
So connecting the 7 principles to
modern civic responsibility, to global citizenship. And then there's Tahotep. His wisdom is specifically recommended to cultivate leadership skills.
a kind of instruction manual for leaders.
Imagine teaching high school students or, future managers about the value of humility, of self-control, of integrity in judgment. These are timeless tools for building ethical leaders who can resist the temptation of modern SFET when they get into power.
I really appreciate the way they try to make this tangible for a modern student or just for us. What specific connections do they draw to, say, modern legal ideals?
The sources suggest curricula should actively link Mott's principles, truth, justice, balance to structures like the U.S. Constitution, to its ideals of fairness and due process.
Why that comparison?
Because, they argue, it demonstrates the ancient, non-European roots of modern democratic thought. It challenges the notion that these concepts came only from Western philosophy.
It just completely shifts the narrative. Are there any specific activities that they suggest we or you listening could do to apply this?
Yes, actually. The authors suggest comparison activities. For instance, you could take the 7 principles of Ma'at and compare them directly with the moral frameworks used by figures like Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela.
And you'd see the continuity.
You'd see the continuity. It becomes undeniable.
So if we were to wrap all this up with one piece of wisdom from the ancient text, we have to go back to Hotep.
We have to. He taught. Wrongdoing never yet brought its venture to port.
Wrongdoing never yet brought its venture to port.
Applying that to modern justice struggles means internalizing the knowledge that true, lasting societal success, true Ma'at, can never be built on suppression or lies. Any movement built on Nisfet is, by its very nature, unsustainable.
This has been wow. This deep dive really showed how the sources unite the moral legacy of Ma'at, the practical wisdom of Tahotep, and the resilience of African civilization across 6 millennia. It's a powerful argument for historical literacy as a foundation for societal balance today.
And the ultimate goal, according to the materials we reviewed, is to empower students and citizens to actively defend truth against ideological distortion. That defense, they say, is the ultimate modern act of maintaining Ma'at.
So what does this 6,000-year lesson really mean for us right now in this world just flooded with information?
It means we have to reflect, really reflect, on the idea that knowledge should be viewed as a sacred trust, a public good that's essential for maintaining societal balance. It must never, ever be treated as a weapon of control to enforce one particular ideology.
Because to break that trust
Is to knowingly invite Isfet. And protecting that trust, that is the enduring, fragile lesson we carry forward from the Lords of Ma'at.